Sounds good.
All right, you guys, I am super pumped to talk to Ashton. She's got quite the story. As you know, I love the story and what she's been through and where she's at now. She self-saboteur, didn't have the confidence, didn't have the self-belief in herself. She worked with people that I've worked with like Mary Morrissey and Alexis Papillon. I probably mispronounced that, but she has gone through a deep, deep dive in herself. And today she's going to share with us how she went from her rock bottom to where she's at now with the thriving coaching business. So without further ado, because you don't want to hear me, Ashton, welcome to Be Real.
Oh, I like it. I didn't, how did I miss that? Be real. That is so good. I was listening to your podcast and I definitely picked up on that authenticity, but I think that's such a perfect title for what we discussed, where you want to take this today. So I'm thankful that you reached out. I'm thankful to be able to serve. I know that if this just helps at least one person, if identify with the fact that you're never stuck.
Right.
That's what I want people to realize. It doesn't really matter where you're at in your circumstances. You're not stuck there unless you choose. So hopefully we can get that realization through to people today.
Well, let's talk about the stuckness. I mean, right now, you guys, so we're recording on 11/4/2020 at 8:10 in the morning, which for those people in America with the TV or a social media or a cell phone, it's election post-election. There's a ton of fear. There's a ton of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
We'll tap into that maybe later on. The energy in the US and the world is pretty crazy right now because it's so polarized. But let's back this train up to like 15 or 20 years ago when you were stuck and you were in a position where you didn't realize it at the time, but after you worked with some of these amazing ladies and gentlemen, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm just sabotaging everything in my life. I'm just, and I've been through that point, and I have that voice in my head that talks to me that says, you're not good enough. You suck. You're a piece of shit. I swear a lot. I'm sorry. I should have put that disclaimer out there.
It's all good.
And you have those self-limiting beliefs that always come up. How did you get through them? Like, how did you get the courage to actually step into what you did and now be this amazing human being that you are now?
A work in progress. This is what I am. But 15 years ago, I was 15. So, I mean, if we really want to go back that far, I was in high school, right?
Okay.
But I was also in rehab. So by 15,
I didn't catch that anywhere.
Not about 15, but 17, I was put into rehab because I was abusing drugs. I was abusing just to numb, not to feel. Where I was really struggling was with anxiety and panic. I had been diagnosed at the time with anxiety panic disorder, which later came out to be just some severe trauma that I didn't know that I had dealt with from early childhood. But I didn't have any coping skills, right? So 15 years ago, numbing was my thing. So that was just the beginning, and it got better before it got worse. I never actually, praise the Lord, had an actual addiction. I was just an extremist. I love the adrenaline, and I was always pushing limits, which I do now in a healthy way.
Right.
But
I see you're working out every day. I can see how you've channeled that energy into different.
You have to. Yes. Yeah. And then we can definitely talk about that because I was so angry, right? And anger is something that you can also channel into passion and purpose. So the script has been completely flipped, and there's still work being done, and I'll go there too. But 15 years ago, where this really started was not understanding how to really emotionally regulate and how to cope with things that came up in my life, circumstances. And I know even sometimes I fall into that old pattern, and I always dig like what's underneath that. But I know adults that still struggle with when circumstances hit the fan, they just fall victim. And that's kind of how I lived for those 10 years that we talked about. I just, when things would happen, I would just think, why is this always happening to me? Why is this always happening to me? So from getting out of rehab, and granted, I was always doing well on the outside. I was wearing that mask of like, everything's cool, I've got this.
Always
and
looking put together, always got the smile, always boosting other people up.
Yep. I was always a
let's
leader. So
let's repack that question to, or unpack that question to, what was this deep childhood trauma? Because I feel like a lot of the people that I resonate with have it. Like I grew up in a big house in the back of a big car. On the outside, people say I hate this fucking new word, privileged. Like, you don't know me. You don't know what I went through. You don't know the abuse that my parents did or didn't do. So like, I hate the word privilege because, you know, a lot of people that feel, oh, you grew up with the silver spoon in your mouth, you can't have trauma. But what was your deep childhood trauma that got you to the point where you needed to numb yourself because you didn't know how to cope? Because school doesn't teach you how to cope with anything except
no,
you
no.
know, being a drug addict.
There was quite a bit of physical,
Okay.
quite a bit of physical and verbal
And was
abuse.
that from mom and pops, or was that from outside sources?
It was from my home, and it was witnessing and then also experiencing.
Got it.
And you know, it's a tough thing to speak about right now for me because my father is actually he's got a terminal illness. So I have this little affinity in my heart to say, okay, like, just out of respect for the man, like, I'm not gonna just throw him out under and completely go there, but we can just say it was enough to
Sure.
to completely beat down my self-esteem, you know, to completely take away my sense of validity in my reality, like
Yeah.
consistently. And this is like the little t trauma is stuff like this, where people don't validate your emotions, where your thoughts aren't looked at as a possibility for truth, right? So people really start to diminish their own self-worth very early on, just by the simple fact that they're being kind of conditioned
Right.
and trained to think that they can't think for themselves,
Absolutely.
or what they feel doesn't matter. So that I didn't really realize was a thing until later on. Obviously the physical stuff, my dad was just angry. I'm sure he had his own stuff, and it just carried over, you know. um
It's hard for us as little humans. So my neighbor that knows a bunch of different people that I know randomly, I saw her on Instagram, and she's got a little 2-year-old, and I was, you know, like, I look out my window and I can see into her building. And so I was like, we started talking, and, you know, nice gal. And I was like, you should come over for dinner one day and we can have like a real conversation about
mhm,
life. I don't have a TV. So when people come to eat with me, like, that's an important thing to me. And the world that we live in has become so skewed, but this little human being relies on you for everything. And when you don't validate them the right way, it creates trauma. And even if, you know, what I want to share with people right now, not to cut you off, is that you don't have to be physically abused to be
yeah,
abused. So
yeah,
your physical abuse was that's another layer, but
right,
people don't have to be physically abused. Like in our house, it was being ignored.
mhm,
If you don't do what I say, I'm just not going to talk to you. So you don't know what to say or what to do because that person's changing constantly. And my dad's
yes,
still alive. I live like 2 miles away. We opened a business together so that I could work on this trauma.
mhm,
And I realized that I'm not responsible to protect him. I'm responsible to protect me.
mhm,
And I don't, if I share stuff that he doesn't like, well, that's not my fucking problem, because I didn't do this to him. He didn't do this to me. He did it for me. And I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing this for me. And
yeah,
so don't be, you know, to the audience out there, don't worry that you weren't physically abused, or we've had people that have been raped on here. We've had people that have been sexually abused multiple
mhm,
times by multiple people over and over and over again. Your trauma is your trauma, and don't discount it just because of where you grew up, or it's not as bad as mine or yours or somebody else's.
yeah. There's really actually no comparison, because what it does to a
Bingo.
person psychologically is not it's like you can't really measure it unless you actually do go measure the brainwaves. Like, you don't really know the impact, because the stories that we create as children, this is where the actual trauma comes from, right? It's what we make it mean about ourselves, and where it starts to really, you know, infuse into our identity or deteriorate our sense of self-worth. That's where it gets bad.
Right.
So the silent treatment is even compared to a form of like actual physical torture. It actually affects the part of the brain that's physical, that hits like physical pain would. So
Right.
it's pretty, it's pretty equal on the scale, but there is no real tell
Right.
as to what was traumatic for you. And this is where attachment styles come in relationships, the anxious attachment style, the secure, the fearful avoidant, the dismissive avoidant. And you'll know, and we don't even have to use the word trauma here, but we can even just say, we'll know that your needs weren't properly met, or your feelings weren't being, you weren't being seen or heard as a child if you're not in a secure attachment, period. There was something going on there. And it's not that, your parents weren't doing the best that they could do.
Right.
Everybody is, but it's our job to kind of peel back the layers and figure out how we can get into that secure space again, how we can get into that emotional regulation again, and not blame, like you said, everything happened for us.
So you grew up in a tough household. You didn't have love for yourself. You didn't have I don't want to say you didn't have love for yourself, but the love you had for yourself was difficult. And
Yeah.
And I don't know how you felt inside, but I struggled with drugs and alcohol my whole life until like 2 months ago. Depending on when this airs, it'll be 3 or 4 months down the road. How do you get from this feeling where you're not worthy, and the person who you love the most and who's supposed to protect you doesn't do what they're supposed to do because they're hurt themselves, right? I'm sure he's got his own story with his childhood, and he's got his own story with what's going on in his life. How do you take that? And you're young in the world of self-development, right? I mean, you're not 50 years old going through this. You started going through this, in the mid-20s.
Yeah, I started in about 25.
Baby, like when I was 25, I was a rock star at everywhere I went except for at myself. But outside, like I was the funnest person to be around. How did you get to the point where you became so self-aware at 24, 25, and you said, okay, I'm going to put the substances down. I'm going to stop beating myself up. I realized that his journey was his journey. My journey is my journey. He served me a purpose that I can't quite comprehend at the moment, but I'm going to pull money out of my accounts so that I can, you basically cashed out your retirement account and invested it in yourself, which is the number one form of self-love. Investment into yourself is the number one form of self-love. And working out, exercising, buying yourself stuff that is going to help boost you. How'd you do that?
Well, like I said, it got worse before it got better. So, post rehab, I wasn't using drugs anymore. I was back on track, doing really well in school. I mean, I had a great life like you. I was modeling, I was waiting tables, I was traveling the world, studying abroad, and all these things. And, I don't know if you're familiar with Gay Hendricks. He wrote the book called I think The Big Leap. Maybe that's not him, but he did write the book. Yeah, I think it's called The Big Leap. And in that he talks about upper limits. And upper limits is just another word for like self-sabotage, right? But that's what, like, patterns don't lie. And you asked me how I got to the awareness. Well, I got to the awareness of a consistent pattern of doing really, really well. And then when I got to like a ceiling basically, or a capacity to what I believed subconsciously I was worthy of, I would find a way, consciously or subconsciously, to fuck it up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
whether that be trashing a relationship, or putting myself in a very compromising position, getting slipped, date rape, drug, and landing in jail. Like, I literally found a way over getting dragged by an Uber. Like, things were happening that were so astronomically
dragged by an Uber.
Dragged, my teeth knocked out, like out of nowhere. But each time these things were happening, they were happening at the cusp of a new set of growth. Like, I was stepping into a new opportunity, or I was moving into my next level, and I was getting to that next level, and it was like, whap, like the next thing I knew, I was doing something just stupid. And it wasn't happening consciously. I didn't know. I really didn't even know I was struggling with self-worth. I felt pretty good about myself. But the awareness really sunk in when I actually moved away from my family. And it was like, there was no more no one to blame, right? When these things continued with me alone, there was no one to blame. And I got myself in a very compromising situation, leaving with a man who had borderline personality disorder, and I didn't have a job, I didn't have money, I had to leave. And I went from living this amazing life as a model and a teacher and a coach to literally like freaking out with no money, knocking on windows of restaurants to see if I could come in to get a job application. And it was another rock bottom. It was another one for me. But what that did is it humbled the heck out of me. And it put me into, I love to say the power move is surrender. It put me into this state of like, okay, like because I was so much of a control freak. That's another thing that came up in with conditioning through childhood was perfectionism, control, which is where that anxiety really stemmed from, right? Really feeling like it's
perfect, you're going to get in trouble, whether it be ignored or beat or put in your room, or you have to sit in your own feces for 3 days until mom comes and picks you up. There's some crazy shit that I've got people's stories.
It is. And shaming was not on my mom's side of the family, but my stepmother and my dad, like shaming was a big thing. It was like, it was very conditional praise, very conditional love, and very conditional acceptance. Like, oh, you're doing good, you're welcome. Oh, you fucked up again, good luck, and it was just like this. There wasn't unconditional love the way it should have been, not unconditional acceptance. So that became my inner dialogue, and the shame became the inner dialogue. But at that time, I didn't really have an option but to surrender. And I had always believed in God, but at this moment it was like, I need you, one of those like knees to the ground moments. And when I did that, my life things just started to shift and move. Like I was able to get an apartment with no proof of income. I substitute taught one day, and the next day they asked me to come back for an interview. I got a job. I was volunteering at a church to give care baskets to battered women. The next thing I knew, she literally, when I showed up, she said, I've been praying for you. Like, you're here. You were born to be a blessing. I didn't have any friends at the time. I had just escaped this toxic relationship. I was hanging out with Chris and Marty. They're in their 80s. They were my only friends. And she's like, I want you to come to my event on Saturday. And when I went, there were like 80 women there with their children, and it was called I Can Still Shine. And she brought me up on stage and she introduced me as her new board member for the board of directors. And I was just like, I just accepted it. I just was like, okay. Well, that led to mentoring these women, and led to mentoring battered women and women who were in drug rehabilitation, both places that I had actually experienced in my life. And it felt so on purpose, right? It felt really good. But that was a ministry-based thing. And at that time I was not feeling qualified. So I was like, I'm going to go search for something that has a spiritual component, because I believe that I did not get here alone. Like I should probably be dead 10 times over by now.
At least 100.
At least
100 lives. I don't know about cats with knives, but I got at least 100. The stories that I tell people, it's like, how are you fucking here, bro?
I don't get it. And that's why I was like, there's no way I'm going to do this coaching thing without bringing in some sort of faith component to it, because I do believe that you need a power greater than you, right? So that's when I started my research, and I found the Life Mastery Institute, and I was like, I'm going to do this. I am going to do this because I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like, I'm tired of my stuff. And, I know what it's like to show up for yourself. I know what it's like I'm an achiever. That's easy. Right. But I didn't know that it was going to take me on a healing journey. I didn't know that at all. I didn't even really know that I needed healing. Like, I didn't know what any of that was. I just knew that I was really good at mentoring people, that I was great at helping people, and that the women that I was working with were getting results in their life. So I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Let's stop there for a second real quick. I love the fact that you said it took me on a healing journey and I didn't know I needed healing.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us, so my story, because you probably don't know it, was everything on the outside, the car, the job, the business, everything was flourishing. And I'd go home and I'd cry 4 or 5 nights a week. I ended up in jail, right? Which is funny because I was an abuser to my ex-girlfriend and I didn't know it. Like, I didn't physically hurt her, but there was so much trauma that I caused her, and I didn't know that I was doing it. Mm-hmm. And you have to stop and realize that you are not broken, but you need to work on yourself to let go of the trauma. But people don't realize that they're hurting. like, we're not allowed to hurt in this society. Our parents, you know, especially with the younger generation, they don't allow kids to hurt in the right
Mm-hmm.
way, and they don't allow us to heal in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're moving through this journey, you realize, oh shit, the big leap. I've been listening to that like 4 times in the last month. My coach is like, you need to listen to this, Vikram, because you're hitting you like to be at 72 degrees. And when you get to 77 degrees, you just fuck yourself up. He's
Yep.
like, once you get the body you like, you fucking start eating donuts and cookies and smoking pot, drinking like a fucking asshole, and you gain 30 pounds. He's like, you work 6 months, you lose the weight, you boom, it's right back on.
Yep.
You get your business to where you want it to be, and then you fucking crush it. You had a business that was making 7 figures, and you walked away from it. Like, who the fuck works their whole life to build a business and get to where they want, where everybody wants to be, and then you walk away and you just drop it like it's a bad habit without anything? And I'm like, holy fuck, dude. He's like, and I've seen you in the wild, because he does, Bedros Kuliman runs the project. He says, I saw you the whole time you're out there, you're self-sabotaging. How do you get that awareness that you need to heal yourself first? As you're helping other people heal themselves, you're still not doing the work on yourself. And then you finally clicked, and it was like, okay, wait a minute. If I'm going to do this, I need to do it the right way. But all the lessons that you said in life, right? You grew up in an abusive home. You had problems with drugs. You end up on stage helping women that grew up or that live in abusive homes, that have problems potentially with drugs and alcohol. All of the worst things that have happened to you have been your greatest blessings. But you got to realize that the world doesn't happen to you, the world happens for you. And then you have to realize, okay, before I can get to the next step, before I can raise that upper limit level on my thermostat, how do I heal? And I assume the life project that you're talking about was with Mary.
Life mastery, the life mastery. Yeah. So that was the start, right? Because Mary taught us, the cool thing about Life Mastery Institute with coaching, and I wish every program did this, is they make you go through your own transformational journey first.
Right.
You don't just get certified as a coach and start coaching people. No, you do the work for almost a year. You do the work and you receive coaching it's a 2-year program, right? So you are getting coached. So you're having to face and bump up against things. But because it was more of a program rather than a one-on-one, you weren't getting mirrored up in the way you do with a one-on-one coach. So it was kind of like I was learning these things. I was learning about rewriting my story, which was everything for me, guys. If you can do something, let go of the past story and rewrite a new one, right? But rewriting the story.
Talk about that a little bit, because I know what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. So we all have this story, the narrative of our identity, of who we are. Mine was, I'm an F up. I can't hold down a relationship. That I'm always going to be alone. Like, I had lots of little narratives that were running my life. And so it was, because what we think about, where we put our attention, is where we're putting our intention. So I was just seeing all these beliefs manifest in my reality. So rewriting my story to actually depict what I actually wanted in my life, rather than what my parents told me that I was, or what my situations or circumstances or failures told me that I was. Like, I just nixed that, and I just decided, like, who do I want to be, right? Who if I 5 years from now, 3 years from now, like, who do I actually need to be in order to bring about the life that I wanted? I stopped focusing on the life that I wanted. I started focusing on who I needed to be, and then I started showing up as her, the best that I could every day. And with all of this, it was a matter of like getting rid of judgment, which was the hardest. And I'm not done with that process, right? Like, we're always still learning, but
process, as you said earlier.
But judgment was a thing. Judgment, hardcore criticism, hardcore judgment. So really turning the like analyzer down in my mind, and giving myself grace and learning how to forgive myself, because like with my old patterns, this process was not linear, and it isn't for anyone usually, but it was very messy. So that was important. But with Mary Morrissey's program, we did some work first, but it wasn't as deep as I needed. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't know what I needed, but every time I started bumping up against things, instead of brushing it under or just chalking it up to self-sabotage, what I started to do is get curious. And I hired a coach every time. I started working with a coach, and I, along this time in the past 5 years, I've had different coaches for different things. Like Alexi, I worked with Alexi on business, but while working with Alexi on business, when I started to notice that I was feeling like that imposter syndrome, well, that's crap. Why am I feeling that? Let's get underneath it. Let's get it out of the way. Right. So then I worked with my life coach on figuring out what within me was not feeling worthy or enough. So we really started to unpack that feeling of unworthiness that I didn't know was a present thing, but it wasn't there on a conscious level, but it was showing up in symptoms, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, procrastination. So really getting underneath that. And since then, like, I haven't just done the conscious level work. I've done a lot of trauma work. I've done EMDR therapy. I've done hypnotherapy. I'm in hypnotherapy right now. I've done Psych-K. I've done ayahuasca. I've done multiple retreats and hardcore workshops to peel back the layers and actually like do somatic work and move the trauma out of my body, because the childhood trauma was one thing, but the consistent traumas that I was creating from 15 to 25, like that was a whole nother thing.
Right. Because that's the residual. That's the residual, right? So we get this trauma, and we get this trauma and we start to judge ourselves, and we're harder on I would never say what I say to myself to anybody.
Right.
I mean, the stuff that I say to myself, oh my God, like, it's no wonder there's days where I haven't wanted to get out of bed. There's no wonder where I sit there and I'm stoned and drunk for 3 months straight. Like, I would never say that to another human being, because it's like, whoa. And you got to stop and realize, like, you are your own worst critic. We don't need enemies in life. We just got to look in the mirror and be like, it's like, it's so crazy the amount of stuff that we do. And I'm a big plant medicine person. Plant medicine has helped me with my sobriety. And I didn't realize that it was such a powerful thing, because we grew up in a world where, don't do this, and this is illegal, and this is bad. And as you start to play with it, you're like, whoa. And so one of my buddies who's basically a shaman, I was like, hey, this is the experience I had. I said, this is crazy. He's like, oh, dude, your shadow self just wants to be a normal person that had a normal childhood. He's like, you always just wanted to have a normal childhood that like all your friends had, where your dad was like, hey, let's go buy a boat and go to the lake. Let's go skiing, son. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. Instead, you had to have this life where you're comparing yourself to other people. You had to be better. Everything had to be perfect. Like in our house for Christmas, the happiest day of the year, it was a routine. You had to wake up, brush your teeth, take a shower, get the pictures, eat the breakfast, do this. And by the time you got to the presents, you're like, all right, we'll open some fucking presents. Because the joy was taken out of it. Like all the fun events, the joy got ripped out of it. And you don't realize those things until you do the work. And then as I'm taking, I'm doing, so I have a little DMT. And so as I'm using the DMT, I'm talking to my buddy. I'm like, dude, I don't think this shit's working. He's like, tell me why. I'm like, well, I get this crazy, like I want to barf. And then I just see myself like as a happy little kid. Well, I'm actually an adult with my kids at the lake. He's like, yeah, dude, you just want to be a normal kid. You just want to have a normal life. You don't want all the trauma that you had. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. He's like, dude, we all go through these traumas. He's like, but all you wanted in life, I'm going to close my window. Sorry, everybody. Nobody wants to hear the 32 fire trucks going down the street. The shadow work that comes out, right? We all have a shadow side of us that we don't talk about. And we're not supposed to talk about the shadow. We're not supposed to talk about things that aren't perfect. We're not supposed to have hardships. And our parents, I see my dad with my little brother. He won't let him even book his own hotel room. I'm like, how's he not, like, how is this acceptable that you won't even let him fall once, and he's going to get to a point in life where he doesn't know how to deal with things.
That's one of the biggest things, even take away trauma. When parents don't allow kids to make their own decisions, adults don't know how to trust themselves. And if we don't trust ourselves, we are screwed.
Talk to me a little bit about that. A lot of my podcasts that I've been recording the last 6-7 weeks, months now, months. A lot of it comes back to this whole notion of parenting. And I don't know if you have children or not. I don't think you have kids.
No.
I didn't see. Yeah. Okay. I didn't see anything about any kids. I don't have kids. I'm going to be 39 in a couple of weeks. I don't trust myself with children. Like, not like I'm going to abuse a child. I'm just so fearful that I'm going to be a shitty dad. And as I do the plant medicine work, I realize, like, more and more, that's all I want to be, is a great father. Like, I don't give a fuck about money anymore. It's like so irrelevant. I want to be a great husband and a great father. Like, that's it. Like, if I accomplish that in life, oh my God. But there's so much fear around it. So unpack that a little bit, because I think, and for those of you who don't know, I'm totally selfish when I bring on my guests, because it's totally for me first. Like, these are all free coaching sessions. I have my notepad. I'm taking fucking notes. Like, people are like, "Oh, you got great guests." I'm like, no, I just get the people that I need. And if you resonate with me, then you need them too. Like, this is free coaching. Like, this is like thousands and thousands of dollars of free coaching that you guys get.
Yeah, it's true.
How do we become people that are okay taking risks when we grew up in a society where risks were not valued and they weren't rewarded, and in fact they were taken away from us?
It's all about the story that you create around what you're doing. And when you reframe what you look at, like, if you used to look at a risk as something that was not good, something that would cause pain or failure or shame to your family, and you reframe that and look at it as an opportunity for growth, a way to step into deeper self-trust, a way to honor your intuition, to listen to your inner wise man, your inner wise woman, then you flip the script on it, right? And you have to risk to reward. So it's a matter of also attaching yourself to the desired outcome. Like, why the fuck are you doing it in the first place? We're not just going to risk for the sake of risk. Like, what's the intention? And is the is the cost of not taking the risk greater than the opportunity that you can leverage by doing it?
The cost is always great. Oh yeah. I mean,
always greater.
It's always, I wish this was live right now so that people could hear it and we could do Q&A with them, because the cost is, you don't get to your deathbed, we've all had people on their deathbed that we know now. And if you have a real conversation, like when my grandpa passed away, I don't think he had there's probably things that he wanted, but he'd done so many things in his life, like, that were scary, right? He moved here at 16 years old from a different country. He lied to the government to bring people over. My grandma was telling us stories about how did he get so many people from all over the world and his house was basically a hotel for immigrants that, his immigrant family and friends that would come to the States. And you get to the deathbed, you're like, I probably could have done this better. But you're 16 years old. What did you know about life? And I think you're attached to the desired outcomes. I think that's so important. You just do the work, and you're going to get to the top of the mountain. And it might take a year, and it might take 5 years. It might take 10 years, right? Your journey is going to be different than my journey, but we're all going to get to where we want to go to if we reframe our story and if we focus on who do I need to be, and we get rid of the judgment, because anything worth doing is worth doing poorly at first. And at first could be like 3 years of sucking. You might have to suck tailwind for 3 years before you finally get enough power to pass that car that you're pacing. It might take you a long time to get to where you need to be. But once you get there, you're going to realize, like, oh, wait, that wasn't even the mountain. That was just like one. And there's still more to climb. Like, I'm still growing, because you either grow or you die. Because you don't stay stagnant in life. You don't stay. See, people are under this impression, well, if I don't do anything, I'm here. Well, no, you're not, because the world's continuing to rise and you're falling back behind. So if you stop exercising for a week, sure, it won't kill you, but that's 2 weeks of productivity gone, because you lost 1 week of activity plus another week, which you're playing catch up to. And so, when you stop working out, And when, you know, you're on Instagram, so everybody can follow her on her Instagram, and she's in the gym 5 or 6 days a week. And she's not like in the gym where for like 5 minutes where she's talking to her girlfriends. She might be doing that, but you can see your videos where you're sweating, like you're pushing yourself, you're struggling. And if you take a week off from that, just like if you take a week off from self-development, if you take a week off from following your routines, you don't lose one, you lose two. Because you got to take a week or two to get back to where you're at. And you have to retrain this thing up here, mindset, which is like, oh man, I have to go. I don't want to go to the gym this week. I don't want to work out this morning. I don't want to do the push-ups. I don't want to do the pull-ups. You got to reset this thing every time you break the habit. So are you a person, you're a coach, clearly. You've put the work in, clearly. You know the patterns. You know how to discuss these things. What does somebody, you know, we're coming up on time, and I want to be respectful of your time. I could go for 4 or 5 hours with you. I bet that's what I told you earlier. I'm like, we could go. We've got a solid
15.
Okay.
I think.
So to kind of start concluding, you've been through some shit in life. So when people look at you, they see you put together now, they see this beautiful human being that's, oh my God, her life is so great. Of course she's can do this. But obviously, when they listen to this, you've spent some time in jail, it sounds like. You've had problems with substance abuse. You've had physical trauma with your family.
Men and relationships and family. And I was part of that, you know? Yeah.
And how do you stay the victor, not the victim? How does a woman or a man right now who feels like they're the victim, how do they change from being the victim to the victor? How do they go from the mindset of the world's happening to me to the world's happening for me?
Yeah, well, I think you have to recognize that it's not just the world's happening for you, that life is not happening to you. Yes, it's happening for you, but it's also happening through you. Your results in your life are a direct reflection of your inner thought systems and your inner beliefs, because not only are you emitting that energy and that frequency to the world, because we're emitting a vibration. Guilt, shame, anger, frustration are very low. And that's where you're going to encounter a lot of shit. When you move up that scale into gratitude, acceptance, joy, love, you attract different circumstances in your life. And to kind of go even deeper with that, I had something I wanted to say here. Go back to your question real fast.
How do you go from a place of being a victim to a victor?
Okay. Yes. So life is happening through you, number one. Like when you take radical responsibility, when you really decide, like, and you recognize you are always in choice. You're always in choice. And whether you're making those choices on purpose or not, doesn't really matter. What matters is that if you're not getting the results that you want, then you have the choice to do something differently. So life is happening through you. You are always in choice. If you take radical responsibility, what would that look like? Well, it didn't really matter how hard I was trying to do this stuff on my own. I was taking 2 steps forward and 10 steps back all the time. Well, I got sick of that. I recognized that I was the one doing that. So I took responsibility and I got support. Like, stop being ashamed of the fact that you need help to get where you want to go. Why not expedite the process? Why not cut the learning curve? I hire some of the best coaches in the world. Why? Because they are going to cut my learning curve in half. Right. Like, I have learned, and they're expensive. And I don't care, because I have made that money back tenfold every time. Every time.
When you invest in you, it's the best gift you can give yourself.
Yeah, so I think radical responsibility and truly recognize you're always in choice. And when you do that, when you decide to say, when you pick up the phone, you're like, okay, I'm going to get some support, or where you walk away from the relationship that's not serving you, or you walk away from the job that's not serving you, what that does is it sends a signal to you and to everybody else, like, I matter. I'm raising my standards. Tony Robbins says the quality of your life is directly proportional to the standards in your life, right? So you've raised your standards. And from that space, you feel empowered. So you're no longer falling victim to the circumstance. You're taking your power back by taking responsibility. Anytime you're in blame, you're just giving your power away. So it's get the heck out of blame. Take responsibility. Say, okay, I know that I'm 100% responsible for my part in this. Even if they did that, it doesn't matter. All you can do is look at you and look at how you're showing up, and consistently, like I said, consistently get curious without judgment.
Yep.
And consistently figure out what is stopping you, blocking you. Like anytime, and this is not going to like just go away magically for me. You don't go from where I was to just being like, oh, I'm good, like everything's perfect in my life. I'm in a relationship. Talk about a workshop.
Yeah.
Talk about personal growth. Like having, that's like one of the greatest catalysts for growth, right? And the patterns that I've seen and the trauma that's come up, it's like now, because it's a conscious partnership, we're not just like pointing like you. It's more of, whoa, what was that? maybe you should take a look at that. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, I will. And then I get curious and I get underneath it, because if you can't, the only way out's through. So I think just consistently going inward and looking at the reason why, like peeling back the layers and really getting clear on why you're showing up the way you're showing up in life.
Tom Bilu, he asks a question. I don't know if he still really asks this, but he says, if you're driving down the road and your whole family gets killed by a drunk driver, whose fault is it? He says, if you take radical responsibility, it's your fault because you decided to leave at the time you did. You decided to take the road you did. You decided to take the path that you did, the car that you own. He said, it's your responsibility. And that's such a mind-blowing experience for people. That's so hard for people to understand. Like, no, it's the drunk driver's fault. And I'm like, one day you'll get to that point where you can take radical responsibility and you'll realize that it was your fault completely. Because, oh, and it gives me chills because I've drunk and driven so many times. Like, and I realize like, oh my gosh, everything that I do is my responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And when you own that, right? When you truly own that, your life changes so dramatic, so quickly, because you stop going into victim mode. And I feel that most people, right? Like right now we're in the elections and people are going to blame Donald Trump or Joe Biden for everything that happens in the next 4 years. They're not going to take responsibility. Oh, it's okay to burn down cities, but why are we doing it for this and this and this? That doesn't make any sense. None of that makes any sense. Like the people that are so smart they're smart people, I think, feel like they're critical thinkers, but they're just really intelligent. They might be logical if at best, but we've lost this critical thinking skill. I don't feel people ask real questions. I don't feel they want
There
to
it is.
know.
Yeah.
They're not curious.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Bam, right there. They're not curious. They don't take responsibility. They're not curious. They don't go inward.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's all projection, blame, lack of responsibility. Everything is happening to me. And then you live a very disempowered victim life and you wonder why you feel like your life sucks. It's like every time I feel like my life sucks, I don't go and look at the job that I'm in or look at the relationship that I'm in and be like, oh, this is why my life sucks. It's like, no, I'm in choice. I chose this. If I'm still going to choose this, then something within me needs to shift. Maybe it's my perspective. Maybe it's like, let's go to a relationship. Maybe a relationship doesn't suck. Maybe your communication sucks.
Right.
Like maybe, in a job, maybe the job doesn't suck. Maybe it's your ability to set boundaries. Maybe it is your ability to speak up for what you need
Right.
in that position.
Yep.
Or your ability to actually see your potential and go after the promotion that you desire. Like
yep.
it really comes down to the way that you're choosing to view and show up to any situation.
Yep.
And then from that space, if you recognize like, oh, even when I shift my perception or even when I change the way that I'm showing up, this still is not in alignment for me, then nix it. That's cool. But until you actually take a look at yourself, you might end up letting go of things or walking away from things or sabotaging things that are actually really great or that you would love, just because you're not looking at how your ineffective patterns are impacting the way you feel in that situation.
God, there's so much good stuff here. I love your control freak analogy too. Like so many of us are trying to control everything and we can't control. People are, right now we're living through this COVID thing and people are blaming everybody else. But if you just take responsibility for your own health, right? So many people said I gained the COVID-20 and I'm like, the fuck, we're in a pandemic and you gained 20 pounds? Well, yeah, all I've been doing is eating. So we're in a pandemic and all we talk about is how health is so important. And people don't even want to take responsibility for that. They want to blame the government. They want to
Mm-hmm.
blame the government for why they're fucking 35 pounds overweight. Like we live in a country with 70% obesity. And
Yeah. And
everybody
I have,
knows. Go ahead.
sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
Continue.
go for it.
I was just saying, and I have a lot of compassion for that or for anybody who is in blame or in victim because they don't know their own power.
Right.
They don't probably have a very healthy sense of self-worth or self-esteem or self-care practice. So to me, I actually look at that with a lot of empathy because I maybe didn't have the weight, but I definitely had body image issues just because I had men say things and I internalized stuff, right? Or comparison or whatever. So I have a lot of compassion for even the person who's put on 20 pounds in COVID. What I don't have tolerance for is the victim shit. Like, okay, I understand you were stress eating. All right, let's take a look at that. Why do you feel like that's the proper way to cope? Let's look at some healthier methods. So I have compassion for it, but I've got compassion for the person, but I don't have tolerance for the victim.
I, 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 I'm gonna try to enforce that, or I don't know what the right word is, but I'm gonna bring that into my world because I
Yeah, and
see
with
it as
by
go go
continue.
go. I
I was
I
just gonna say, yeah, go ahead. Let's hear how you see it.
I feel like the exact opposite because I feel like we know what we need to do, but sometimes I forget how much work I've had to do on myself to get over that. Because at one point I weighed like 235, 240 pounds. I was a big
Mm-hmm.
boy, and I had all this. I was going through a divorce. I had a horrible relationship, and I didn't want to take. I said, "Oh, it's her." I would always blame. Internally, I'd blame her. Externally, I'd say, "Oh, she's not a bad person," but internally, I'm like, "What?" And I would
Mm-hmm.
always never want to take responsibility for my actions in the relationship. And then I would
Right.
stress eat. And I ended up one day looking in the mirror with 4 chins. And I'm like, where'd Vikram go? And so for those people out there, how did they have compassion for themselves? I mean, I think it's some of the same answers, but how does somebody who stress eats right now, because I've had a lot of conversation with people because I'm really big into health and wellness. How does somebody who doesn't, how do they get over that hump and have compassion for themselves so that they can invest the time and the energy and the money into their own health?
Yep. Um, Intention, I think, is really important. So, what's your intention? Is your intention to be skinny, or is your intention to have health
Right.
and wellness? Is your intention to be perfect at what you're doing, or is your intention to progress? Like,
Hmm.
it's about giving yourself permission to not do things perfectly, but to do it progressively.
Okay.
And how I how I've been able to manage and be very, very consistent in spite of the things that I've dealt with in my life, and consistent and
You
of
haven't dealt
showing
with
up from
anything. Come on. Your life's been so cush.
nothing,
Jeez.
nothing. Walk in the park. um, there's a question that has helped me so much in every decision that I struggle with making, whether it be, it doesn't really matter when it comes to showing up for yourself. And the question is, if I truly loved myself, what would I do?
Ooh, I love that one.
It's pretty convicting. It's like it's jacked up if you turn your back on yourself. So I've adopted the idea that I show up for myself the way I would my own best friend. And if I truly love myself, what would I do? And for some people, that question's hard to answer because they don't really love themselves. So if, what would a person who loved themselves do?
Right.
Right. And it's helpful when you're in the decision making of what to eat, or when you don't feel like going to the gym,
Right.
or when you don't feel like doing the healing work, but you recognize it's impacting your life. If you truly loved yourself, what would you do? Because you don't want to stay feeling this way. So if I
Right.
love myself, I'm going to go figure out how to feel better.
Right. One of my buddies, he went on a 12-month hiatus after a divorce, pretty nasty divorce, and he was he had some issues where he cheated on his spouse, and they had communication issues, and he went on a 12-month no drinking, no sex, no dating, just self-love journey. Found God, right? Whatever your God is, whether it's universal source energy or it's Christianity or you're Muslim or Sikh, whatever your God is, it doesn't matter. It's just your beliefs. And he does every morning. when he wakes up, he does 3 things for himself. So whether it's, and I've adopted this, so in the morning I wake up, I'll do as many pull-ups and push-ups and squats that I can, just right out of bed, like just pop up. I make my bed. So that's 2 things I do for myself, because who doesn't love coming home to a nice, clean made bed? It's like a hotel. And then you do one more thing, whether it's like 2 minutes of gratitude, or it's walking the dog, or it's meditation. And then you go into the mirror and you say 3 things you love about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, people, we don't have to have like these huge, oh my God, I love myself for like, they could just be the smallest things. Like, I love myself for getting up in the morning and making my bed. I love
Be
myself.
real with yourself.
Yeah. Let's be real.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that I get to interview amazing people because I'm vulnerable. And I love that, this podcast is probably going to save one life and help that one person who needs it the most. Like, the billions and billions and billions, that may or may not ever happen. But like you said, if one person can be affected by this in a positive light, why is that diminished, right? And so I've had to reframe myself, like, one life is so valuable. And if we can change one, and so you do 3 things in the morning that are good for you, and then you tell yourself 3 things that you love about yourself. And you like you said, you're raising that vibration from, I'm not worthy, to I am the most worthy. And I can't tell you guys, like, if I could share the last 60, maybe I'll have to do a private podcast, but if I could share the last 60 or 90 days during a pandemic, I have a rental property. I don't know how I bought it. It just happened. It's got a renter in it. Our business is thriving all of a sudden. I have a coaching company now. I'm like, where does it all come from? I get to interview amazing people for a podcast. I have an audio engineer, and I'm like, scratching my head thinking, how did this all happen? How did this all happen? And it's because when you live in that form of gratitude, when you live in that form of higher vibrations, when you live in the form that everything's happening for me, through me, because of me, and then I get to spread that to others, things start to change. And they don't typically change slow. It's like a rapid change.
Oh yeah. You can flip your situation really, really fast by moving up your frequency. But most people don't get up that ladder because they're carrying a lot of guilt and shame,
right?
Or anger and resentment. So you really have to, that's where the healing work comes in, and the forgiveness work comes in, because right now you're operating from gratitude, and with gratitude, it just pours in more abundance and more abundance and more abundance. But it took you peeling back the layers and moving, for lack of better terms, like getting the gunk out.
Yeah.
Right. To clear the space for all these good things. And most people want all the good things and they go after it and they wonder why it falls apart. Well, you don't have the capacity for it. You don't have the room because you haven't cleared out the shit.
The biggest, the book, The Big Leap, you guys, it's on Audible. My coach currently, there's a couple things I want to share real quick, you guys. And we're coming up on time. Multiple coaches. You have your business coach, you have your life coach, you have your health coach, you have your spiritual coach, you have your shaman, if you believe in that, you have your religious or your spirituality coach, you have your finance person. Like, those are all different people. Your business person isn't going to be your finance person. They're different. Your health coach might get you feeling better, drop some of the weight, work through some of your shit, but they're not going to be the person that you tell your personal stories to. You might need to hire 4 or 5 or 6 coaches, and some of them are going to suck, and that's okay. They're still going to help you. But you might need to hire a lot of people in your life to help you. To The Big Leap, right? You got to get through that. And that's not a book you read once or twice. I would get on my bike and I would listen to it over and over and over and over again. And there's something about hypnotic rhythm that we talk a lot about. And if you keep listening to it and you'll see where you've hit the upper limits in relationships or with family or with friends or with business. Learning to take radical responsibility is so crucial to your success. And then the question, I think this is probably, if you didn't learn anything, write this question down. If I truly loved myself, what would I do? Or if I was a person who loved myself, what would I tell them to do? Or what would I tell my friend that I love to do in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
Compassion for yourself is so
Yeah.
powerful. Where can people find you? Because you guys should follow her because her stuff's
Yeah.
legit.
Thank you. Instagram is my main platform. So Ashton Cantou is my handle, but my website's in my bio. So I do offer free discovery calls. So a couple hours a week, half-hour discovery calls. I carve out time to just serve people, to
Nice.
see if we're a good fit to work together, or just to see if I can help them. Well, I typically do help them
All right.
gain deeper clarity or a direction in their life, or just uncover some blocks or move through some problems. So that's a great way to start showing up for yourself. You guys book that call and choose yourself, and just get out of your own way, like we've been saying. And I do life and business, so you get 2 for 1 with me.
um, any last words for the audience?
I would say I'm going to leave you guys with 3 questions that have helped me gauge and progress consistently in my life. The first question is, what am I doing that's working? We should always be capitalizing on what is working in our life. We should be looking at that. We should be celebrating that. We should be building upon that. So what am I doing that's working? The second question is, what am I doing that's not working? This is where that radical responsibility comes in. Be real with yourself. If something is not working, if it's ineffective, don't judge yourself. Not right or wrong, not good or bad. Just, is it effective or not? Is it serving you or not? Okay. And be real and cut it out. Just sever it. And then the third question is, what might I try that I haven't tried yet? So many of us are expecting different results, but we're not willing to do something differently. Have you been reading self-help book after self-help book, but never hired a coach? That type of thing. Have you tried diet after diet, but never hired a nutritionalist? Like, what might you try that you haven't tried yet? Because guaranteed, you have not exhausted all the options. There's no reason to quit or give up. Try something different.
I love it. Oh my God. I knew this was going to be good, guys. I knew, I reached out to you, what, 3 or 4 days ago, and we put this
Mm-hmm.
together so fast. And my heart connected so deeply somehow to you. I'm like, I got to reach out to her and invite her on the podcast because she's going
I'm
to
glad
help
you did.
change lives. And I'm glad you responded so quickly, and you were open to it. We are a newer podcast that's gonna I really feel that it's gonna rock people's world in a positive way. I hope you guys follow her online. I hope you guys reach out to her. She is a powerhouse of knowledge. I've watched many of her videos. I've read some of her interviews. Whether you hire her or not, you can tell by her compassion that she is a true person, that even if you take 30 minutes of her time, that's you have no idea what 30 minutes with somebody who's gone through so much and who's come out on the other side and is still willing to do the work can do for you. So without taking too much more of your day, because I know you're a busy woman running multiple businesses and doing all sorts of great things for your community, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And to everybody else, I can speak for their behalf. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. This was great. Truly.
Thank you.